Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the very best thing about Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition, and the very best thing and the very worst thing about Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition. All right, let's jump right into it. So Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition, of course, is one of the most unusual editions of Dungeons & Dragons. It's the best way to describe it is the ill-fated edition. Without a doubt, there's no debate. Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition is the worst edition of all the editions. But there were some things that were really good about it. Let's talk about that. So what was the best thing about 4th Edition? Here you go. I think that Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition was the most innovative rule system of all the editions, as far as innovative rules. Using the rules in a way that made the game, I would say, tactically and strategically more complex and more intriguing than any other edition. I think there was a ton of really brilliant ideas in Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition, okay? So let's talk about what they were, okay? And also, I can hear you already. You're like, well, wouldn't Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition be more innovative? Actually, no. I don't think it's really even... actually, Dungeons & Dragons is not an innovation of anything, right? It was a revolution of literature. Dungeons & Dragons 1st Edition was a revolution in literature, a revolution in gaming, and a revolution in art, right? And I would even say it was a revolution in self-care. So it really just shattered a whole lot of planes of existence as far as what it was doing. So it really wasn't an innovation. It was more than an innovation, right? But when you just look at the rule sets for each of the editions, 4th Edition did some things that just were not done in any other edition that I thought were really spectacular. So let's get into it. So one of the things that 4th Edition did was it put magic items in the player's handbook. It's the only edition that did this. It was absolutely incredible, and it was saying magic items are really the realm of the players, right? Not just the dungeon masters. And I love this from the perspective of it acknowledging that adventurers earn gold, and just like they can buy mundane equipment, they should be able to buy magic items. It was really brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen, that the magic items were going into the player's handbook. Absolutely brilliant idea, and I to this day I'm just absolutely thrilled by it, and I think it's one of the greatest things that's in there. The other thing that 4th Edition did was it made it so that so basically, every single edition of Dungeons & Dragons, except one, has a massive problem when it comes to spells. So basically, how many pages are dedicated to the wizard in the player's handbook? Well, because of spells, well over 100. Over 100 pages are given to the wizard. How many pages in every single edition of Dungeons & Dragons, except 4th Edition, is dedicated to a fighter? 10, 20 max? Right? 4th Edition did away with all of that. 4th Edition made it so that if you were a class, you got between 15 and 20 pages. And that's it, right? It didn't give you just spells upon spells upon spells, right? And it didn't give you 50 times more options than all the other player characters. And it really made the playing field level. And it said if you're a fighter, you're going to have some real powers, dailies, encounter powers, daily powers, and instants, right? And it made sure that every single class had an equal amount of cool things to do. And it did it through the page count, which is the most effective way. It's the only honest way to do it. It was incredible. It's really cool aspect of 4th Edition. Life paths were in 4th Edition. There were just lots and lots of incredible ideas in 4th Edition. So innovative rule set is definitely the best thing about 4th Edition. And I'll say there are a lot of things that 4th Edition contained that I really miss. Oh, solo monsters. Solo monsters were a brilliant idea that came out of 4th edition. Another thing they did in 4th edition was they said there are monsters that go poof when you strike them. So it didn't matter if you dealt 1 damage or 12 points of damage. If you struck a monster, they were, if you successfully hit and dealt any damage to the monster died. They had a special name for it too. I can't remember, but it was really swift. And because even if you have a monster that has 1d4 damage, that could be 4 separate attacks that a player has to take that monster down. Whereas this kind of really granular, once and done monster was in 4th edition, as well as super powerful solo monsters. And just the way that 4th edition looked at monsters and categorized them, just absolutely brilliant. 4th edition, there's no question, it's the most ill-fated edition of all the Dungeons & Dragons editions. It only lasted from 2008 until 2014, okay? It only lasted for 6 years. It is officially now the shortest edition of Dungeons & Dragons. It was much hated. So let's get into what was the worst thing about 4th edition. It sundered the community. It didn't matter if, the debate on whether 4th edition was good or bad is irrelevant. What cannot be debated is it split the community into people who loved it and people who hated it. And trust and believe, there were a lot of people who loved it, but there were an equal amount, if not more, who hated it. And why did they hate it? Well, they're not wrong. Basically, there was a 1-2 punch on how 4th edition was created. In my opinion, this was the flow. So in the early 2000s, the MMORPG Warhammer, World of Warhammer came out. WoW, right? I can't, it's hard to even explain how much of a comet strike that game was. It hit with such incredible force that I saw marriages ended over that game. I'm not kidding. People would vow to be together forever, and a dude's like, you know what? I saw this at least three times, where a guy was like, I have a beautiful woman who loves me, but I'd really like to have a third 80th level character, so I'm going to do that instead. Right? It was incredible. I'd love to tell you that genders are equal and all. Of course, genders are equal. I never saw. I know it happened. But I can name 3 dudes who lost their wife over Wizard. WoW. I never met any men who were like, my wife is too dedicated to the game. I guess maybe it's I guess it kind of makes sense because most of my friends are men. That's probably the issue, right? So I think that's probably the issue. I'm still not convinced that an equal amount of women left their husbands for WoW. If I'm wrong on that, please let me know. If you know, just a bunch of women who left their, if you know just a bunch of men who left their wives, I'd love to hear that. I'm not sure. It doesn't, I know the genders are equal and the same, but I didn't see that in the evidence, in the in the sample data. Let me know if you saw that on your side. Maybe different regions are different. So basically, 4th edition, love it or hate it, there's no two ways about it. It split the community, and any product where half or more of your customers hate it, that ain't gonna stick around. It's just not that's not a good way to sell product, right? And it didn't. After 6 years, they shut it down on 4th edition. And basically, so I think Wizards of the Coast built 4th edition to be the tabletop version of WoW, and that absolutely infuriated a whole bunch of people. And they were like, "Listen, I play video games." I think a lot of D&D people were like, "I don't really care about video games," so it upset them. Then there was a whole group of Dungeons & Dragons people who were like, "Hey, WoW's great, but I don't want it at my table," right? Like, I don't want you to try to replicate video games with my Dungeons and Dragons game. Frankly, and I don't understand how Wizards of the Coast didn't know that was going to fail, because that's the greatest thing about Dungeons and Dragons is while video games have to spend months or years chasing their customer base with algorithms that can be responsive, there's no algorithm in the world that can beat a human brain, when it comes to truly complex things, not simple things like chess. So it's, which is literally black and white. So basically, I really think, the worst thing about Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition was it did not have any cohesion. It did not have any unity in it, in the game itself. And that is just unforgivable. And it was unforgivable, and there was no peace over the whole issue. It was just a wrap it, you're done. It was finished, right? So all that's my opinion. What do you think was the best thing about 4th edition, and what do you think was the worst thing about 4th edition? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.